Good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, your boy Virtus here and welcome back to my Unreal Engine 4 Legends of Zelda livestream. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at how we can set up a basic landscape for our game. Now over the past few videos we've been working on the main functionality for the game. So having said that, we can run around, we can jump, we can swing our sword, we can use a little shield block, and we've also got health, magic and a bunch of pickups as well. However, our environment is a little bit dull at this point and there's not that much to it. So what we're going to be doing is sculpting ourselves a basic terrain, so that's going to be things like mountains, rocks and all of that good stuff, and we're also going to be setting up a landscape material and painting that on there as well. And we're also going to be taking a moment to talk about some of the things that you might want to do when you're trying to create a stylized environment. So there's going to be lots to cover in today's video and I'm really looking forward to it. I'd also like to take a moment to thank all the awesome Patreons that have made this live stream series possible, and also if you do want access to the completed project files and you don't want to have to go through all the tutorials, you can download this game and the project files inside of Unreal Engine if you support on Patreon. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive straight into it. So first things first, I'm going to need to create a new level for this game. So what I'm going to do is just go to File in the top left hand corner and then just go to Default Level. And then with this, what I'm actually going to do is delete this little block here that we've got because we don't need this. We're going to be generating our own terrain. And then with this, I'm just going to go to the Landscape tab in the top left hand corner here. You can just press the little icon or just press Shift and 3 as well. So what it's going to do is take you into this management mode. From here you can adjust some of the settings to get a different size or different quality terrain. That is entirely up to you. However, I'm pretty comfortable with the settings that are here at the moment, so I'm just going to press create. If you want to learn about what some of these different settings do and how you can use them to adjust your terrain, then I definitely advise that you check out my level design series, which is going to cover this kind of stuff and a whole bunch more as well. The links for that is going to be in the description if you do want to check that out. Anyway, so just go ahead and create this terrain, and then from here we're going to be put into the sculpting mode. Now what I'm going to do in terms of sculpting is straightforward. I am essentially going to create some mountains that go around the edge and are going to form the boundaries of the level, and then I'm also going to sculpt in a couple of hills and a lake and a few other bits as well, and then from there we can move on to painting them. So let's go ahead and start working on those mountains around the edge. Now bear in mind, I'm not going to be working on anything too complex because I want you guys to have a bit of creative freedom when it comes to making your terrain. I don't want you to copy what I've done. Instead, I just want you to learn the tools that I'm teaching you at the moment to create your own terrain. So because I'm going to be working on some mountains, with my sculpt tool selected, I am going to turn up the brush size to make it nice and big, and then with my tool strength nice and high as well, I'm just going to zoom out and paint all around the edges. If you want to get around your terrain a little bit quicker, just turn your camera speed up. So with this, just start painting by left clicking and just paint those mountains on. So if you zoom in now, you should have some basic mountains. Now if they're not high enough, all you got to do is just keep making those extra passes on there and just make them nice and tall. Now there's a couple of things that you could do to make these sort of mountains a bit more realistic. Once again, that's going to be something that I'll be teaching in the landscape series, but what I would say is try not to just make them too steep because then they become a little bit unrealistic. Just have varying different heights. Make sure none of them are sort of too different though. Just make it relatively consistent. And then what I'm going to do is just do a quick erosion pass on this to give it a little bit of detail. But make sure you do not have your strength up too high on the erosion, otherwise it's just going to ruin them. So maybe turn it down to something like 0.3. and then just go ahead and slap that on there on the mountains, and you're going to realize, you'll soon see that you'll get all these little lines, these little ledges, and it's going to make them look quite nice. And once you have a material on there as well, they'll look even better. Now these bits here are going to be a little bit difficult, and the reason why they're going to be difficult is because it's dark, you can't see them. So just in the top left hand corner of your viewport, just set your lighting mode to unlit, and then just sort of put that on there just like that. And then for the rest, just go back to the regular lit mode and just keep putting these on here, and from there we're good to go. So that's our mountains out of the way. Now don't worry too much about the color of these or the black lines or anything. That's going to be something we'll be sorting with our material shortly. What I want to focus on is the physical shape of the mountains and the rest of the parts. So moving on from here, while I've still got my erosion tool selected, I'm actually going to put a bit of a lake in our level. And the lake is just going to go in here. You can turn this into any shape you want really, but what I would say is try not to make it too circular. And the reason why I'm saying that is because lakes generally aren't circular in shape. I mean, they're sort of usually off a little bit. I mean, they're not always going to be circular. It's just not the way that water flows around really. So what I'm going to do is put this one in here, and I think this should be good. What I'm going to do then is just press play to get into our level, but notice I'm falling through the ground. And the way to fix this is to select our player start, turn down your camera speed and just go and find that, and then from there just make sure this player start is not below the ground like mine is here. So you'll notice if I drag it up a little bit, it's going to say bad size. So just drag this up above the terrain until that little bad size warning has gone. If you can't find your player start within your scene, check in your world outliner, which is pretty much where my camera on the live stream is at the moment, and you can just select it in there. Let's press play. Walk over to this little lake here, and all I want to do is really sort of gauge a little bit of size really. So I just want to make sure it's not too big, not too small, and for the most part I'm pretty comfortable with this. I like the incline and all of that good stuff. So with that done, let's go ahead and move on to making some hills and some cliffs and some other bits like that. So what I'm going to do is go back into my landscape painting mode, landscape sculpting mode, go back to the sculpt tool, and then with my tool strength up, I am literally just going to click every so often to sort of give it a little bit of noise, give it a little bit of variance in the landscape, and then from that I can start painting on my ramps, my roads, the paths, and all of that good stuff. So essentially what I'm going to do is have the players walk through and over these hills to make it look, you know, a bit more realistic, because realistically your landscapes in real life are not going to be completely flat. I mean, it depends on the type of environment really, but you don't want it to be too extreme, you don't want it to be too flat. It's good to have a bit of variance. Now what I've done here is I've made them a bit too tall really. So what I'm going to do is have my tool strength on the smooth tool quite low, and I'm just going to smoothen these out a little bit to make them not so high, because at the moment they are just a bit all over the place really. And right now if I press play, and because I've added the hills, I managed to make my player start go under the ground again. So if I select my player start from the world outliner, move it up, press play, and if I walk over these, honestly I don't think they are too tall now. I think they should be good to go. So moving on from here, let's take a moment to add some materials onto this landscape. Now when it comes to the textures that we're going to be using, I want them to keep within the Legend of Zelda style. And what I mean by that is, if I take a look at some Legends of Zelda gameplay, I'm just going to Google this so that you can see it. If I take a look at some images of the gameplay, it's quite cartoony textures. They're not trying to be detailed, they're just quite stylized, they're quite bright, they're quite vibrant, and it looks quite nice. So what I've done is I've actually got some textures for you guys to use, and you guys can just plug these into your projects and you can go on there. But whenever you're working with an environment, you should take a moment to think about what you're trying to accomplish, maybe look at some references so you can see something similar, maybe just inspire you a little bit, but for me this is kind of what I'm looking for, and that's where I've got these textures for too. So what I've done is I've downloaded a bunch of textures, and I've actually included these in the latest version of the Zelda file. So if you haven't got those already, go ahead and download them in the link in the description, and you'll have this landscape textures folder. Within here I've got a texture for grass, mud and rock, and that is just the basics of the textures that I'm going to be putting in there for today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a folder in my content browser within the main Zelda folder. So open up your blue Zelda folder, right click and add a new folder called landscape. Let's just call it landscape. Open this up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 little folders. First one is going to be for the grass. Going to right click, make a second one for the mud, and then lastly I'm going to make one for the rock as well. And now we're just going to import all the different textures in here so we can set up the material. So starting off with the grass, open that up, and then if you open up your grass folder within the Zelda project files, select everything apart from the readme file, and then just drag and drop and just import this in here. Now bear in mind, you're not going to have to use every one of these different types of textures. There is just, you know, diffuse, normal, albedo and a bunch of other stuff just for the sake of it. But the main ones that we're going to be using for now is going to be the sort of diffuse and the normal map. So go to your mud folder now you've imported those, and then go to the TGA folder, and then let's open up the 1K textures. Just select all of these, drag and drop to import these in here. Give it a couple of seconds to import all of these, and then from there we'll just go to the rock folder and do the same. So go back and back again, go to the rock folder, select all of this, and then just import all of it. Make sure you're not trying to import the readme file or anything like that. So give those a couple of seconds and we should be good to go to create our material. So we've got those, they've imported, press OK, and let's go back to our main landscape folder. What we need to do now then is to actually create a material that we can use for the landscape. We need to set up all the landscape layer sort of blend components in there, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do all of that. So what I'm going to do is right click in my landscape folder and just create a normal regular material. I'm going to give this the name landscape underscore material, and then I'm going to open this up, and what I'm going to do is use the landscape layer blend node and hook this up into the base color, and I'm going to add some layers into this. So what I'm going to do is add some layers. I'm going to add 3 of these. So just press the little plus icon down here in the details panel to add the element with the layer blend selected until you have 3 of these. Now the names, the first one is going to be called grass, the second layer name is going to be mud, and the third one is going to be called rock. And you can see those names we've just put in there have now also been reflected on the layer blend as well. For your preview weight for each and every one of these, just set this to 0.5 to work with them. So what you need to do now then is hook up your diffuse for your grass, your mud and your rock into here. So I've got to go to my grass folder, get the diffuse, which is this one here, underscore ALB. With that selected, just hold down T and then left click in here to bring in that texture sample and hook that up to your grass. Moving on from there, go to your mud folder, get your underscore ALB again, which is your diffuse, select it, hold down T, and then click, and that's going to add in the texture sample with the texture already in there for you. And then one last time, we're going to go to our rock folder, get the underscore ALB, which is again is your diffuse, and then hold down T, left click, and add in that texture sample. Now if that doesn't work for you guys for any reason, you can also just type in texture sample and then just click it, and you can assign it down here in the details panel too. But for now, this is good. So what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to get rid of some of the specularity, because our material, like our grass for example, is just way too shiny. So I'm going to go to constants, create a constant, and hook this up to the specular. And I'm going to set this to about 0.2. So this way it's not as shiny as it was before. Still a bit too shiny for grass, so I'm going to set this down to 0.1. And I think this is going to be a bit better. So moving on, what I'm going to do is now use the normal map. So the diffuse, the one that we've set up here for the base color, is going to give the color of the material. The normal map is going to add a little bit of depth to it. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So grab your layer blend, press Ctrl C to copy that, deselect it and press Ctrl V to paste. And what we're going to do is move this down here and just hook it up into your normal. So what we're going to do now, while we're in our rock folder, get your normal map, which is the one that says underscore N for the rock. Just press T and left click and hook this up to your layer for the rock. Go to your mud folder and then get this one here, underscore N, select it, hold down T and left click, hook this up to your mud, and then lastly, go to your grass folder, get the normal map for that, which is underscore N again. It's just sort of those guys and their naming conventions. And then back in here, hold down T, left click, and hook this up just like that. So what you should have now is a material which looks a little bit like this. Now you can see the grass and the mud and the rock sort of blending together a little bit. Don't worry about that too much, but there is an extra bit of depth on there, which is quite nice, and you'll see that come into play when we start painting on our landscape material. So press apply, and then we're just going to close this material. It's done for now. So what we're going to do now then is actually apply it to the landscape and then start painting it on. So click on your landscape, and then in the details panel in the bottom right, just go to landscape material, and with your landscape material selected in the content browser at the bottom here, just go ahead and hook this up to your landscape material. Press the little arrow that's going to say use selected asset from content browser, and then what should happen from there is your landscape's going to go black. And the reason why it's going black is because there's no sort of landscape layer information, and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. Go to your landscape tab, your landscape mode rather, go to the painting tab, and down here we've got our 3 layers, but right now there is no information for them. We need to create some layer information. So with your grass, press the little plus icon here to create the layer info and create a weight blended layer. And then with this, just go to your Zelda folder, go to your landscape, and just press OK and just chuck it in there. And do the same thing for each one of those. So that includes the mud, the rock, just add those weight blended layers in the landscape folder, just like that. So into the landscape folder, and we're good. So what you should have happening now is your terrain should look like your first layer, which is your grass. And if we press play, we should be able to see our grass in the game, and it should really be coming to life, looking quite nice. Now what you will have are these black grid lines. These lines are simply from so these lines are just where we haven't built the lighting. It's not an issue, and it's going to be something that we're going to fix shortly. As for the material, you can see it tiles quite a lot. It doesn't look too realistic, so we're going to be adjusting that using the material. And the way we're going to do this is open up our landscape material, and then we're going to use landscape layer coordinates. And what this is going to allow me to do is, if I hook this up to the UVs for every single one of my texture samples, it is going to allow me to make this tile a little bit less. So the UVs for every one of these texture samples, just hook it up. So what I'm going to do with this, landscape coordinates, mapping scale, you can change this. So if I set this to say 5 and then press apply, it's going to make a change to the size of our material in the game. So if you press apply, it's going to start compiling things. It's going to take a little bit of time, but once it does, you're going to notice it's going to become bigger. So if we look at this, jump into the game, you can see it's become a lot less tiled. The moment I think this is a bit too big now, so what I'm going to do is just go in here and make an adjustment to that, and maybe set it to 3 instead. And what I've also noticed is the normal map is a bit too strong on the grass, so I'm actually going to make some adjustments. Now I think the depth is nice, but the shininess is what's really killing it, so I'm just going to set the specularity all the way down to 0. So this way there should now be no shininess. So if we press apply, give it a couple of seconds, jump into the game, and what we should have is a much better looking landscape. Almost there, and there we go, our landscape no longer has the shininess, but we've got the grass in there. So what we need to do now then is just take a moment to start painting on the mud and the grass into our terrain now that it looks nice. So what I'm going to do, we've got our grass everywhere, I'm just going to paint on top of this. I'm going to start off with my lake by selecting the mud layer, turning my brush size down, and just start painting in the lake. When you first start painting on that section by left clicking, it's going to turn this, checkerboarded color while it first compiles. It's not an issue, don't worry about it. If it's not painting quick enough, turn your tool strength up, and you can also make your brush size bigger as well if that is something that you want to do. But what you'll notice now is that I can quite easily start painting on the textures for my lake here. It's literally just as simple as that, and now we've got the mud at the bottom of our lake. You can even blend it around the edges as well if that's something that you want to do. And what I mean by that is you can just make it overlap a little bit, and then what you can use is the smooth tool to sort of smooth it between the grass, just like that. Make it seem a little bit more natural instead of having those harsh edges, and that's just one of these many sort of realistic terrain painting techniques. What you might also want to paint is some of the mountains. Now, by no means do you need to paint everything the same way that I have. I'm just trying to demonstrate how you use the tools so you can take that creative freedom and start working on all of this yourself, doing your own thing. So what I'm going to do now is select my rock layer, turn my brush size all the way up, and just start painting on top of the grass. My tool strength is quite low, so I'm going to turn that up and just paint this on here. Now, for some reason, it's not painting it on. So I got to figure out why. So what I might have to do is just go back to my rock, start painting this on. It's still not doing it. So what I'm going to do is actually put the rock layer above the grass. Still not doing it. Open up my landscape material and make sure that I've got everything hooked up the way it should be. So it should be good with that. Let's open up our layer blend, and so we've got our preview weight 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. We are good to go. So all I gotta do is just paint it on. So, and the reason why it's not painting on is because I'm using the smooth tool. I am a bit of a numpty there. So just go to the paint tool and just paint on your rock. And you can see now your mountains and your rock are really starting to come to life. What I'm going to do in the top right of my viewport, just turn your camera speed up, zoom out a little bit, and then you can start painting on your rock a little bit more and start to form those mountains of yours around the edges. If you want to, you can even go as far as using a little bit of rock at the bottom of your lake. It's entirely up to you. But for now, I'm just going to smoothen sort of some of this off that I've just added here. Turn my brush size down. Smooth this off nicely. Just like that. Now then, so we're starting to get our landscape coming to life, but right now it doesn't really have a purpose. You don't know where to go. So what I'm going to do is go back to my painting mode, and I'm going to choose a starting point in the level for my Zelda, for my Link character, and that is going to be over here. So what I'm going to do is paint some mud over here, and then I'm simply going to draw a little path that's going to take him from this side of the level all the way over to there by the lake. So what I'm going to do is turn my brush size down and just paint all the way over sort of here to like a little finishing point. So hopefully you guys are starting to learn how to use the landscape tool and should have a pretty neat looking landscape. Now what you should have is something that looks a bit like this or something similar. But what you're still going to be missing is things like fences, trees, rocks, and all of that good stuff. And that's going to be something that we're going to be introducing later on in the series. But for now, what you should have is a nice looking landscape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end off the video here. Have your creative freedom, and I hope you've learned the tools and techniques for managing and creating these landscapes. Make sure you head over to the next video where we start to bring these sort of this game a little bit further to life. Anyway guys, once again, thanks to all the Patreons that have made this possible, and don't forget, if you do want the completed project file and you want to skip the code, just go ahead and unlock that on Patreon. But for now guys, once again, thanks for watching, stay awesome, keep creating, your boy Virtus, signing out. This video was made possible by my supporters on Patreon. If you want more videos like this, check out my Patreon page using the link in the description. To stay up to date on new releases, make sure you follow us on social media.